It's important to note the distinction between acceleration and max velocity upright sprinting mechanics, because that will have a bit of a carryover and implication to exercises we choose in the weight room. So in general, acceleration-based work is going to be much more horizontal versus max velocity is going to be much more upright. So when we take that then into like, okay, what are we looking at from maybe a plyometric standpoint that is going to help us build the elasticity and stiffness that we need for those positions in acceleration upright running, we can then transfer that into the weight room side of things. So when we look at it as just a general standpoint, we'll say, okay, for acceleration-based movements that we want to replicate from a plyometric standpoint, there's got to be a greater amount of knee flexion. They have to have, their hips have to be a little bit lower, and there probably has to be a little bit more of a inclined trunk angle versus max velocity upright stuff is going to be minimal knee bend. They're going to be in a much more upright trunk position, and those are really the kind of some of the main differences here. So let's just say, let's start with plyometrics more than anything. So when we start with like a broad jump, they're trying to gain as much distance horizontally on two legs, that is much more of an acceleration based, or would have more application to acceleration based movements versus, let's just say, repeat high hurdle jumps where when they land, there's only going to be maybe about 20 degrees of knee flexion before they go into the next one. Those might be more beneficial from an upright sprinting standpoint. Then maybe we look at other modes of conditioning. So say we have an injury where we can't really do either, but we want to start building that acceleration capacity, and we have an assault bike or a watt bike on our hands. Well, if we want to get them exposed to a little bit more lower body acceleration-based mechanics, we might drop the bike seat lower so that way they're in more of a knee flexion position, versus if we want to start gradually exposing them to the joint positions that they need from an upright sprinting standpoint, we might have the seat higher so they're not fully extending, but they're not getting into as much knee flexion as they were in a lower seat based movement. So again, these are some all distinctions that we take into account with our performance programming and training more than anything, where we want to look at what is the demands from an on-field standpoint or sprinting standpoint that we are trying to replicate and improve at, and then say, okay, what positions we need to get them into in the weight room. So another perfect example from like a lifting standpoint is a trap bar deadlift or a barbell back squat at full depth might be a little bit more applicable for building acceleration-based movements versus from an upright sprinting standpoint, a barbell step-up is going to be a little bit more because you're more applicable because you're not going to have as much knee flexion. So these are all things that kind of go into it, and ultimately, like a lot of the movements that I just described there are nothing fancy more than they're all basic movements that have been around for a while. I think that's the other key side of this is when we're looking at how to improve on-field performance, we have to stay simple with basic exercises. We don't want to get fancy, because when we get fancy, that usually means there's less stability involved, so you can't load as much, and as a result, you're not going to get as much adaptation.